Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the programming librarian here at the Bexley Public Library. We have three wonderful poets, so I'll try to make this short and sweet. Really quick, the library closes at 8 o'clock. We will probably hear a closing announcement 15 till 8. That will not affect anyone in this room. So if you have to go, you're more than welcome to do so, but this program can go past 8, and then I'll make sure everybody gets out. So no worries when the closing announcement comes, you don't have to wrap anything. Like I said, we have three wonderful poets. We're very happy to have Rosa Lane, Stephen Haven, and Clayton Adam Clark here tonight. They all have very deserved and esteemed bios, so I condensed them, and then I invite you all to visit their websites to learn more about each poet. Rosa Lane is a poet and architect and the author of 4 poetry collections. Her most recent collection, Called Back, was published by Tupelo Press in 2024 and was the winner of the 2025 Maine Literary Book Award. Lane's poems have appeared in the Asheville Poetry Review, Cloudbank Cutthroat, Nimrod, Massachusetts Review, Plowshares, and many other publications. You can find out more about Rosa at their website, rosalane.com. Stephen Haven's 4th collection of poems, The Flight of Meaning, was published by Slant Books in 2025, was a finalist for England's International Beverly Prize for Literature. Haven is also the founding director of the Low Residency MFA program at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio, where he led the program for 10 years. His work has appeared in American Poetry Review, Crazy Horse, Guernica, Asheville Poetry Review, and many other publications. You can find out more about Stephen at his website, stephenhaven.com. And Clayton Adam Clark lives in St. Louis, his hometown, where he works as a mental health counselor in private practice alongside his spouse Tina and their therapy dog Tank. His latest poetry collection, Auscultate, was published by Galileo Press in 2025, and his debut poetry collection, A Finitude of Skin, won the Moon City Poetry Award in 2018. He earned his MFA in poetry from The Ohio State University and a master's in clinical mental health counseling from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And you can find out more about Clayton and his poetry at claytonadamclark.com. So our first poet is Rosa Lane. I'll turn it over to Rosa. All 3 poets will read, and then we'll do a quick transition to a discussion and any Q&A from the audience. Thank you all for coming.
My life is like an oar dragging a whole ocean behind it. In the morning wake of waves, I hem my eye along the seam of sky and water. I want the thin line fastened around my waist. I want to jump overboard, swim where the gull can peck from my skull all that is extra. I wrote that poem 50 years ago. This next one I wrote before I was born. You'll see what I mean. Electricity buzzes the yellow bulb in Maine's humid heat. June bugs bum the porch light with spiny legs, date-colored and oversized. Spring peepers pin the night, pitch a universe in my mother's kitchen, except I have not yet occurred to her. She is 16, and I'll be hers in less than a year. Supper's on the table for the boy who will be my father. His 19-year-old body big and husky. He rinses dried splashes of pork from the day's ocean in a small blue basin, enameled and filled with hand-pumped water drawn from the well. Fireflies like the field of flame, conceived in the heat of summer, I appear a small spark of night, planted in the deep crevice between them. Thank you so much for coming. It's so wonderful to see you, new friends, old friends, and thank you, Zach, for a great introduction. What a beautiful space. I'll be reading from Called Back, the last 2 words that Emily Dickinson wrote. called back gives queer voice to Emily Dickinson, who has been what I call straight-washed for more than a century. Each poem is evoked by a Dickinson epigraph or two. I will read the title of the poem, and then I will read the epigraphs, one or two, and then I'll repeat the title of the poem so you know where my poem begins. I'll begin with a poem entitled French Sardines. You'll hear the French city Nantes, which is located at the mouth of the Loire River. It was known in the 19th century for its sardine industry. Maggie was a domestic servant. You'll hear her name as well. She was the confidant for Emily Dickinson. French Sardines. Wild nights, were I with thee. Wild nights should be our luxury. Dickinson, number 249. French sardines. French sardines arrive from Boston, tin-plated. Maggie levers her can cutter at the edge, jacks her hand around the lid of hunger's fulcrum, silver-skinned and nested. Their caudal fins from a sea of marinade, white salt cured, drenched in extra virgin. Beheaded and gutted by the women of Nantes, we lay each body across a soda cracker I have for days dreamed of, craving. Nights, behind each pearly eye, we swim up the fishware. We spawn in sandy silt along the odic thighs of the Loire. We flutter our little deaths. Susan Gilbert, Huntington Gilbert, is now recognized by scholars as the core love of Emily Dickinson. And Susan did marry Austin Dickinson, Emily Dickinson's brother. Austin and Susan lived next door in a home that was built for themselves called the Evergreens, which was just a hedge away from the homestead where Emily Dickinson and her family lived. Emily and Susan exchanged letters at the hedge. Between their yards, Emily was known to put a gentian flower in these letters that they exchanged. The next poem acknowledges this sweet swap and the gentian flower named after King Gentius. The poem refers to the bitter herb as used in alcoholic beverages and liqueurs. Gentian. After Emily Dickinson's I Taste a Liquor Never Brewed, number 214. To own a Susan of my own is of itself a bliss. Whatever realm I forfeit, Lord, continue me in this. Dickinson, number 1401. Gentian. Near the wash basin, I snip locks of red laid on the commode. I strip your shoulder bare, unbutton your back, pearl by pearl, down the arch, hands as silken as our path, grass-worn, its spine stretching your evergreens to my homestead. Satine lace-ups in step, breasts intoxicated with letters we exchange at the hedge, each pressed with gentian trumpets or bitters, or the drunken tonic of King Gentius. Call me his prince. Below the crown, my forehead flattens against the pane, framed in a glaze. When our lit chambers face, we watch the sun drop evenings behind the steeple, hang over Amherst woods,
whisking dark, stagger, nightfall, bliss, blued, drunk. Amputate my freckled bosom, make me bearded like a man. Those two lines appear in Emily Dickinson's poem number 1737, and I've only seen one scholar, Maria Popova, in her work entitled Figurings, which came out in 2019. Those two lines speak to a gender fluidity that really needs to be brought to the surface. Pere de Corps is the next poem I'll read that does that, I hope. Pere de Corps. Amputate my freckled bosom, make me bearded like a man. Dickinson, number 1737. Pere de Corps. A pair of bodies hangs from my chest, sistered and whaleboned in a cuff. I want nothing of them, still tethered and corseted, those oddments, small thimbles, two berries made for the mouth, speak a primal language, not mine. The wolf's ravish, or the infant's pucker for milk, a utensil gorged and sucked. Those fleshy hills are there for swallowing. Wan, two drifts of snow, wind-blown, renounced, raised by slice or tear, my bust blanked, my sternum flanked by ribs basil flat, like paired susurras, phantom nipples, hover endless paws. My hairless chin dense and wild, my mouth squared. I am my beard, edged along the jaw, tinted curls, free fall, repronounced, plumed, and proud. Not only did Emily Dickinson have code words for Susan, which appear in her poems, everything from Pearl to Cleopatra to Heaven to Eden and many others, but she also had code words for men, divers, because divers could dive for the pearl, pearl being a code name for Susan. In the next poem, you will hear the word meerschaum, which is referring to a 19th century smoking pipe. You'll hear the word latakia, which is referring to a sweet pipe tobacco. And verboten means forbidden by an authority. Othered, I speak. Her breast is fit for pearls, but I was not a diver. Her brow is fit for thrones, but I have not a crest. Dickinson, number 84. Othered, I speak. I am wrong to start with, to have. To strop and hone the blade, shave without a tuft. To bind, bone wrap my breasts that will not leave. To swag my trousers and waistcoat in the dark no one sees. To ramrod the barrel, guncock, lean a corner, the house dead ends. To hike sails, captain my ship, doldrum, drifting nowhere windless. To bypass the lungs, drop my voice to the diaphragm, timbre gravitas. To smoke my meerschaum, virile and fragrant, blending latakia, smoke rings in solo. I curve the flesh of Adam's apple, verboten, pith the larynx, my mouth plosive, hushed. Dear Sir, number 7, and they no more remember me nor ever turn to tell me why. Oh, master, this is misery. Dickinson, number 462. Love-stricken wise, all that love can speak. Dickinson, number 1368. Dear sir, letter number 7. Tell me, sir, why I wake with a bird in my mouth, why my heart seeks a nest in a sparrow's beak when I worship want on the tip of her wing, why when I visit Eden I want Eve, not Adam, why I long for doors that cannot open, why I plant myself in situ, move about light, yet cannot lift my feet, why I live more myth than element, why I fold myself in a letter delivered elsewhere, my address unopened, still lying on the table, why my finger inserts the loop of a hot teacup, its curved lip sips, kisses a future not yet, why the moon comes to my window full-bellied, stares, why, when I reach for her, she empties, turns sickle, leaves me in shreds. And I'll end with a poem that is entitled Limning Death. Dickinson was obsessed with death, which inspired this poem, Limning Death. Limning not only means to give life to, but also in art refers to outlining a subject. You'll also hear the phrase an impalement artist associated with a spinning human target, usually referring to a target girl pinned to a circular board at the mercy of a knife thrower in a circus stunt that we know as the Wheel of Death. Limning Death. I felt a funeral in my brain. Dickinson, number 280. She dealt her pretty words like blades. Dickinson, number 479. Immortalities strut around this homestead as if they own everything. Their ceremonials stop at the mantle forevering. Father's daguerreotypes seal our faces, brass matted, muted, red velvet softens a haze of black bleeding in. My little room, more shadow than light, spins on the wheel of death. I am an impalement artist, one knife toss away from the thrower's mistake. I disappear in tiny mouthfuls each day. I study any sign of being taken. My room stunned by morning, I am still here. Yesterday, I died again, swept myself into a dustpan, rattled the windows like a beggar's cup. I yearn for the perennial garden, yet I have no gender, just the moon waxing its wont at the bluff. Thank you so much.
So my name is Stephen Haven, and I'm just going to read 5 poems to give you a taste of my book, The Flight for Meaning. I tend to think of putting a book of poems together in terms of threads of related material that I try to weave together to come up with an aesthetic whole that is the book itself. And so I'll just read a couple of related poems. The first 2 I'm going to read are pandemic poems. There's some pandemic poems in this book. The first of these, titled Sugar, and I'll just say that during the pandemic, like so many other people, we spent a lot of time on our back porch. And what we saw there were hummingbirds, other kinds of birds, and squirrels. This poem is about the hummingbirds that we saw there. And somewhere around that time, I read an article about the decline of the bee population. And how the Japanese were trying an experimental method to fertilize flowers by floating soap bubbles. So that image comes into this poem. This is sugar. I have heard the Japanese burst bubbles to pollinate their flowers, but I prefer the hummingbird, sharing its nectar with a bee or two, those light hovercrafts stitching the air with their slight wings, but only one of them a needle nose. 1,000 beats in the very minute its muscle drills the white stamen, around which grows the deeper purple labia minor of the violet hibiscus, all of which offers, all the way through October, a taste of its delicate petals. Today we sip our coffee, having given up our lumps of sugar long ago. But there is a sweetness on the tongue, not only from the cream we still indulge as we look over our neighbor's shrub, 2 town criers, 2 back porch birds, the feeder of our table, our folding chairs, our cause diminished for a moment, but rising like prisms you can see on the thin, soapy film, the small round wands we blew our breath through, a breeze that stings 90 degrees across the ocean, and the Boston burbs saying in the dark, the tender and the blur, this is the violet, all is well with the world. My second pandemic poem is about swimming in Walden. I was living in Bedford, only about 20 or 25 minutes from Walden Pond. My brother Mark happens to be in the audience tonight, and back in the 80s we swam in Walden Pond together. I also had a good friend from Japan, Nobuhiko Takizawa, who revered Walden Pond. He called it the Holy Lake, and he liked to swim there when he visited me in Boston. He shared with me that Thoreau is more famous in Japan than Emerson, so I referred to, at one point, to Thoreau or Walden overshadowing the old manse. That's a reference to Emerson's grandfather's home that Emerson inherited. One moment here, let me find this page. And this is a poem about swimming in Walden. And what I didn't want to do, we didn't use those ankle flotation devices that would keep you floating if you had a cramp or something. My wife and I like to go freeform, and we started swimming all the way across the pond after a while and back. And my fear was that I would drown there and then forever be known as a Thoreauvian devotee. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be a Thoreauvian devotee. I was just swimming there. But I thought, going out in the middle of that pond and laying on my back with my ears under the water, that pond's 90 feet, 100 feet deep, and looking up at the sky, maybe I was getting somewhat of the experience of what the Transcendentalists were talking about. This poem's called Walden. Whatever Walden is to me, we swam there 2 Julys. I hope to skirt that never-ending trope, drowning like a pilgrim in that pond. We pushed past mothers and their kids, cedared summers in Wellfleet cottages, past foreign languages that hummed across the narrow circle of that one dirt path, tossing stones from their home countries on a mound that almost sanctified an eclipse of the old manse. One Japanese devotee, his beard a gnarled shrub in sandy soil, all the way from the hagiography of Tokuyama City, bruised by the crowd, the boom boxes, the concrete latrines on his holy shore, pushed past the dapper beach, and in a mud-stuck tortoise's mammoth shell, found a native genius wallowing in some self-made myth we saw beneath the wooden footbridge. That was Nobuhiko, my old friend. That was 30 years ago, And now I am alone, the swimmer in dead center, who treads the 90 feet beneath the sun, clarified by a few lingering clouds that filter him, buoy him above the silt-free water. A quarter-mile out, floating on his back, ears under, going nowhere fast, he finds the mind slung in a parenthesis of sky, as if his head were helmeted by the entire stratosphere that leaves him nowhere, leaves him fast, pulling toward the one canvas bag that holds his shades and mask, glad for the ring, the click that offers him the promise of a door, 2 dinner plates, 2 lit candles, 1 old dying dog. So another thread of related material that shows up in this book. There are many other threads. I'm basically reading from 2 of them tonight. Is that this book has 6 poems after single lines by Pasolini. Actually, one of the poems is after 3 lines by the Italian poet Paolo Pasolini. In the book, those lines appear as titles. And as I was reading Pasolini and finding remarkable lines written by that great poet, I would scribble them down and I began to think, well, what poem would go with that line if I used it as a title? In the case of this first poem in that thread, the only one I will read tonight after Pasolini, I took 3 lines. So the first 3 lines of this poem are Pasolini's. Pasolini was writing about bird song, and he seems to suggest that birds sing from an incredibly fragile place, and by extension, maybe that's what human beings do as well. Lines after Pasolini. The birds were singing in the sunbeams in an intricate, uncertain weft, deafening, vulnerable to existence. They did not carp of their own demise, relative to the sweep of land and sky, how on a peripheral, stubborn perch, no language other than music dwarfed their ascent from Mesozoic forests. The nothing they did not lack, they did not need to own, not one lament in those hollow bones, swaying the whorls of a single tree like the wind through their lost chances. They did not tone of the first hard light, first night, silence like shards of colored glass hanging from a string, metal leavening a porch beam, or pentatonic carved bamboo clacking where no cedar wax wings wobble in the knit of a tree, almost bundled by these burdens of little being, blossoming on being, asking of the clouds only a little rain. Not one had gained, so could not lose, a sacramental hue. Everywhere around them, the one song they knew, not one kernel, clinging to a cob. Night, nowhere near, night coming on. So I'll go to the title poem now. And maybe in some ways, there are other poems in the book that relate to the Pasolini thread. Many of those poems in some way concern looking at the natural world and wondering just what it is that we see there. We live in such a secular society, so what is it exactly about natural beauty that still moves us? Do we see, still as the 19th century romantics did, a spiritual presence in that world? Aren't we wiser than that by now not to see that? Do we bring that spiritual presence if we think one is there? Is it actually coming from the human imagination? Is there a spiritual presence in the mind and in nature, and we have to recognize one another the way that transcendentalists thought? Is there nothing there at all? Or are we fools to think we even have any kind of consciousness whatsoever? This poem is about seeing 2 complete rainbows above the Provincetown Harbor. And along with everyone else, I went running with a woman I was dating at the time to stare at those rainbows. They stuck around for about 90 minutes. And rather than think that any one of the poems in this thread, somehow sums up what my book is about, I tend to think of these poems in conversation with one another. This poem's called The Flight from Meaning. When the double rainbow shimmered in, we abandoned the street musician, sat by the oceanside park, chewing taffy under those full arcs. How fully we vanish into them, out on some primary edge, the temples of nothing that draw us in, light and air, nothing substantially there. Out over the harbor, our still capacity for wonder. Whatever we murmured in some ambulant pleasure, long in that late night, the tongue-tipped ladle of each breast, which one of us now will ever remember. Like St. Louis, I thought, like some flipped rail, Gothic architecture, the wharf dwarfed in the lens-snared light. In the flight from meaning, no one fully escapes. The mass of humanity, neither innocent nor guilty. Then the black and white details of us, fresh cuts in my old family stone, our wet lithograph, the unsubstantiated drift of the finite, the infinite, new love standing before it, late in the summer, long in the drive back to where we started. Even before they vanish, they melt into the dark room of us, things we long to touch. Prosecco, bluefish, bread, rosemary sprigs steamed over, the soft anatomy of clams. And it hardly even rained, someone said, running to the harbor. No promise, no meaning, not even its brother, edged in those sun-refracting spans, the blunt brushed holes of our homes again. So I'll end with another poem that is looking out at the natural world. Sometimes hard to even think of this particular subject as a part of the natural world, and that would be black holes. I am getting older, like many of us here, and when people die in my life, people I feel close to, I've always known, of course, that we're going to die, and the people around me are going to die, but when it happens, it's just an astounding thing. They just seem to absolutely disappear. So maybe that's what this poem is about, but again, the central metaphor has to do with black holes. This poem, I'll end with this, is called Singularity. That's what we are, each of us a dead star, constellations where we have gone missing through the slips, the swallows of those holes. In the measure of our time, we call it singularity, our collapsed commons, seeding the newborn, soon forgotten furl. A sweetness slipped into the box of a primary gray, light spun like cotton candy, where we tucked our pencils, our erasers. September, then after, the fairest fields a gaping O, the grasses beaten down and overgrown. A nothingness, that substance, descant that can hardly sing past noon, bruised in that womb, snares in a smothered start. Light years it has taken us, seeing from that dark. Thank you.
I'm a little nervous, so I'm going to start with some thank yous and get the wiggles out a little bit, and then I'll read some poems. First of all, I want to say thank you all for being here So great to see some friendly faces too. What a joy. I want to say thank you to Zach and Bexley for having us here. I want to give a shout out, I don't know if Linda's here, but Gramercy across the bookstore across the street kind of put this together, put me in touch with Rosa and Stephen, which has been a really joy to get to know them in this process, and hopefully we'll get to read together again soon. Let's see. I should thank, I got a travel award from Regional Arts Commission in St. Louis, which is this wonderful arts supporting organization that gives out grants for local artists. And they gave me some money to kind of go around and share this book. So I would be remiss if I didn't thank them. So this is my book, Auscultate. It's my second collection. Although, as I briefly mentioned to Kathy, it's probably more honest to call it like my first collection. It just got published second because publishing poetry is hard, it turns out, and it can take some time. And I think the time is worth it because then you get this chance to keep revising and improving. It was also, I think, appropriate to get to come here because with this kind of being maybe my first collection of poems, a lot of them started here or were written here in the first place or are based on experiences here. So that feels kind of fitting to be able to share this here today with you guys. Let's see. So I'm going to maybe read a few that kind of tie into this place here. A lot of these are written probably more about my hometown, St. Louis, Missouri, but very much the Midwest. And I found my time getting to kind of be here in Ohio gave me some distance from my home and let me kind of understand it in a new way that was harder to do when I was from there, and just felt like oxygen. It was just the thing around me. You know what I didn't do? It was like time. Okay. In about 5 minutes, we're going to get that announcement, so I'll take a brief pause there. All right, this one is based on experience while I was teaching here at Ohio State. I was standing in, couldn't tell you what the name of the building is, but I was standing in the building, and across the way was this building also on campus that had like kind of a gold tint to the windows. I don't know if anybody knows what that building is called, but I had this moment of like, can I find myself in that reflection? So that comes up here, and then maybe the other thing of importance from on the back end here is, or on the front end rather, is this refers to leap second, which is a thing we do with our time to kind of keep our time from drifting and keep it the same. We had some, just like we had a leap day, there's a leap second as well. Self-portrait of leap second vigil. Snow halts so I can see beyond the weather outside. Across the street, my building is reflected in the gold sheen windows of another building. 6 months ago, a second was added to this day, and I just found my window in the reflections. Whoever first observed summer turn autumn then winter must have felt abandoned in those, the longest months ever. Now we know to add a second once or twice a year to keep our time aligned with Earth's rotation, what with it dragging water against space and not keeping up with the frantic oscillations of cesium 133. No way that first witness defies guilt. What fear to watch the ground die beneath your feet? Who could shoulder such blame, the out-and-out demise? With Earth never turning faster than time, it must be monitored. An earthquake in the ocean knocks us out of sync. I didn't feel it cracking across the globe. All 2.68 microseconds Earth stood still, but others learned the weight of level buildings. And here I am, straining to see my silhouette across the span of street. Each body is a building, and my wristwatch keeps ticking too, but it suffers clock drift like everything else. Earth may have created the sins, but man called them, fixing them outside our buildings to points and gape at. How many more we can find in reflection? I peer through a one-way mirror to see my own golden eyes, like I could conquer the space between my selves. No, it's a single body marked on granite with 2 dates. This one moved this many winters. If we're not vigilant, noon slides into midnight or vice versa, and the dates lose meaning because the ocean won't quit grasping for all it doesn't hold. And astigmatic, I will not see myself. It didn't exist, a single first person who beheld winter alone. But it's easier to understand a lone man, balled up beneath leaves in a gully, uphill with his river, who learns the need to build while crying out against the fire, burning beneath his fingers' blistered skin. This next one has an epigraph. It's called Fire Break. It's got an epigraph that says, after Westlake landfill, Bridgeton, Missouri. I'm from St. Louis. Near Bridgeton is a landfill. There's a whole bunch of contamination issues, one of which is that they buried a bunch of World War II nuclear waste there, and trying to figure that out. So the fire break was something to keep that from moving where they didn't expect it to go. I'm not sure, but it's kind of a big problem, and I think a super fun site, or at least was at some point. So what I was thinking about was it's next to this landfill, the nuclear waste and the waste of the place where I live, including probably mine, and consumption, and then history or legacy. So there's a reference to my grandfather in here too. Fire break. A rat scuttled ahead of me, trailing the corner where the sidewalk met cinder block wall, until it found ingress to one of the last abandoned buildings in my neighborhood. Delivery trucks coaled each house, offloading fuel in yards when my grandfather grew up here, and mothers paid boys movie fare to shovel it down chutes. Dodging rats between brick homes until they emptied their shovels, the boys called slow rats, a twang of shovelhead resounding up and out the narrow shaded space. Today my city's lights are coal-fired, and the retired North landfill has burned flameless in its bowels for the past 10 years. I do know oxygen bled so far subsurface. The Army Corps of Engineers had to bury a fire break as the burn wormed closer to some legacy nuclear waste interred in World War II. There's talk of rats when this ends, assuming the role of dominant species. Maybe they learn how, in time, to burn our epic or build with it. Calcareous fossils and carbonate mud lithified beneath the weight of shallow seas, limestone remains here. My coal chute is bricked up and the furnace burns clear natural gas, with the limestone steps to my front door still green with lichen. Like my grandfather before me, I've scrubbed dirt and base plant life from poor slabs. It was from that rock I saw a night crawler wriggling into the street below. I foresaw the desert life before it. I've seen the dead worm on pavement, animated by a legion of ants. With a stick, I tried to save the annelid, tossing it in my yard for our mutual benefit of its devotion to the soil, only to see it writhe its way back to the concrete, fleeing clover I'd sprayed with chemicals the day before, earth burning with the fire we only feel. I think I'm going to move to the last section. No, I've got this other poem that I absolutely started in one of Kathy Fagan's workshops way back when, but it took me a long time to figure out what to do with it and where to go with it. It's now called The Missouri. 1. He swerves on the bridge and wrecks in the right lane. Once out, his sneakers slip on the ice, just like the semi sliding his way, its horn blaring. 2. There's only time for one foot to the guardrail, and over the flapping of his coat, the Missouri shoves along 200 feet below. 3. The smacking shallow spill of a flightless bird, hard rock grip of the water tamping his thighs, the neck of his shirt. Plans fight, the hand-clapped surface and scream have fled, were carried past the state park downstream. 4. Somewhere a diaphragm, a rhythmic between the graying organs and eyes dilated, treads water. So the 4-lane truss bridge bows with the weight of 10 stopped cars and the semi, unwrapped installed, in witness to the grave lacunae of his pupils. 5. Naked I shall return whence I came. Calves clutched, buttocks, biceps to chest, neck to shoulder, the womb home where mind slides past confusion, where cell ions crawl-stroke their membranes. 6. Geese crowd a boat launch to rest on the South Trek, and the river makes east, then south of the Mississippi, and much always is lost, abducted to replenish this basement, his watershed. 7. His father and police man John boats for 80 days, their seminary boy not dead until they find his body. Fish don't live much in this passageway, apathy turned edema, so it's a train man that crashes the bank and scares a flock from the boy. The geese peck, then flee the dormant grasses, hungry enough to eat what minerals wash ashore. I'm going to dip into the last section here and read another poem that I wrote during my time here in Columbus. based on my neighbor was kind of observing, he seemed to be somebody who would like go find stuff and then bring it home, and some of the times it would accumulate in his yard, but then sometimes he'd pitch it in the alley between our homes. And so again, like thinking about like consumption and waste and what is salvage and what is not, and how that applies both in like our human detritus, but also like among other species. So this is called consumed. The man across the alley returns home in his truck each afternoon, his take overflowing the bed. Some things he casts into the alley, his garage congested with sequestered treasures. The discard pile, a broom, TV, 3 rotting railroad ties, a particle board, a ladder-back chair, gathers. The broken glass, there's always broken glass, grows too. Sparrows and robins peck insects out of the ties. They hop the beams to chip and pull, possess. An August afternoon when birds hide in the trees and flies touch down and crawl, seeking and seeking, does the wood possess maggots deposited in the furrows of man's refuse? Or still does all this trash, now just one pile, belong to him? Perhaps the maggots have the wood in which they eat, expel, pupate, a childhood home. The truck is gone, and there's violence in the alley. A robin yanks its take, takes flight, alights to the glass-strewn concrete to do the breaking that makes digestion easy. Its stomach can't be the fly's child's. Birds eat till full, then leave. The man will leave more garbage to feed the pile, flies leave young in. With luck, they'll grow enough to fly away before Tuesday, and the garbage men decimate the pile of leavings left by the skinny man who gathers leavings. Having leads to filling, full can only leave, and when nobody's satisfied for good, there's violence in the alley. Muggy heat exudes from the pile, because last night, glutted clouds discharged their cleansing waste. Decay, spurred and untold, all bodies bear their witness, these bodies all the time beholden. I think I got time for one last one, and I'm going to read the last poem in here, which I wrote kind of in the process at the very end when I was putting this collection together, or working through it and editing. I had a really great experience with Barrett Warner at Galileo Press, who, one, because I had a lot of distance from these poems, having kind of written them, having some time since I've written them first, getting to like revision, reimagine these, but then also he was like, hey, I feel like we need a movement at the end. What if you wrote a poem from the perspective of a deer, because there's some deer in here, and I was like, I don't know, man, we can try it and see how it goes, and then we'll decide whether it stays. We ultimately decided it stayed. I had no idea where to even begin in that, so I borrowed, this kind of like sits at the end, and I borrowed the last line from each of the poems in the 4th section to kind of like make sort of like a medley, like a throwback echo sort of thing. So if you read the collection and then get to this, some of it will sound familiar.
May I have your attention, please? The library closes in 10 minutes. Please check out your library materials before exiting the building. Thank you.
That was perfect. Okay, cool. That was the epigraph. Yeah. You guys can stay. I'm told we can stay. All right. Before I end, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. It means the world to me. Uncoupled, the body disposes of this witness, for poison's part and parcel of any preservation. Lift your shoes and jog these rows. My footprints probably track you back to another American feedlot. My sternum felt the outside, Duchamp's comic calculation, ha ha ha. I cannot stand to be signified on stained steel when I've been so careful about chronic wasting disease. How's this for a priority? Everything's never here, and the population of any choice exceeds 2, no matter what the brainstem signals. Your body never beholden to any one thing except this one. You know how if you have 2 seeds and you give one sun and water and soil, it unfurls a plant, but you give all that, then take any of it away, the bunch grass dies, never regrows, but that other seed remains, no worse for the lack? Stop watching already. In all this flight, you move your body down a road to still, but I've not fled to death. Pray I sought the salty grass that pops roadside these early months after the plow has passed. Thank you.
have absolutely nothing to say.
Oh, hold on. Okay, I'll fix that.
And some cool bass tones there. Yeah, Elizabeth.
So I know your first book was a prize winner, was a
Mm.
contest.
Yes.
So Galileo Press, so what was the process? Was that also a contest or it
No.
was just a submission?
Open submission,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and so got selected on the submission pile, and I waited like I think like a year and a half before we actually got started, and then kind of moved through the process, and then printing and all that. So yeah, it was kind of a long process, but like I said, it was really productive, like creative editor experience. Really enjoyed that. It helped me kind of push again stuff that I hadn't looked or like written, so I didn't have as much attachment to like maybe something fresh. It's a really good experience. Thanks. When I was a graduate student here, yeah, I taught poetry and the English 101, the composition course, yeah, and business writing too, yeah.
Stephen, as you find out that Pasolini wrote poetry, A, and B, who knew you write poetry about nature topics? I mean, seriously, it seems really out there.
Well, is this working? I think in Italy, he's considered one of the great Italian poets of the 20th century.
Really?
So and the amount of his work translated into English is small compared to the body of his work. I think there's a new collection from the University of Chicago. I think it came out around 2018. But I loved his films.
Okay.
My sister-in-law is a film scholar, Lisa.
Not Pasolini, though.
Not Pasolini. I don't know that we share that appreciation, but I love his trilogy of life films, the three, Decameron, Canterbury Tales, and and the Arabian Nights. Those are very joyful films. I love them because they portray sex in a really beautiful, positive way. Unlike his last film, Salo, which is truly demonic. But Pasolini also, according to the Vatican, filmed one of the greatest religious films in the history of film. And I believe that's I always forget whether it's the Gospel according to I think it's St. Matthew. So he was all over the place in that way. I admire that in him, in a huge, tremendous range. So I loved his films, and it was actually during a Facebook
May I have your attention, please? The library closes in 5 minutes. Please check out your library materials before exiting the building. Thank you.
That's either God or the Vatican interrupting. But someone said, "Wow, have you read his poems?" And so it was, for me, a great reading experience. Discovering a poet I didn't realize. But with a devout religious upbringing, which my brother and I shared, and a rebellion against that in the biggest way. Even as he, I guess, a long poem called "Religion in Our Time," which was important for me to read. Also, we grew up in a working-class Italian neighborhood on this side of the Atlantic, and Pasolini was in a working-class neighborhood, so I felt some points of commonality, and I read him as deeply as I could.
I have a question for Rosa. If you might want to talk a little bit about your experience in writing about Dickinson and what critics or poets who write about her you might have consulted, or did you just sort of go on your own sort of sense of what she was up to in the poems?
Am I okay to?
You're on.
Okay, I'm on. Thank you for that question. I started my odyssey with Dickinson in 2019, in spring, in March, and probably like most of us in the room, thought of Emily Dickinson as this obscure, poet who hunkered down in a corner bedroom and was melancholic because perhaps of a failed heterosexual love with a mystery man no one has been able to name. So one morning in March 2019, I was on my way to get an innocent cup of coffee when I looked on the dining room table and saw a book entitled Open Me Carefully, Emily Dickinson's Intimate Letters to Susan Huntington Dickinson. And the word intimate really caught my eye. And I thought, now wait just a minute, this can't be what I'm thinking it might be. So I read the introduction by editors Ellen Louise Hart and Martha Nell Smith, both scholars of Dickinson. They had compiled 250 plus letters that Emily had written to Dickinson throughout the whole lifetime of Emily. And in their introduction, they certainly expressed their findings of a homoerotic relationship that was romantic and passionate, that Emily, the two women, felt toward each other, Emily and Susan, and they had met in their late teens. So also, Ellen and Martha invited people to see for yourself, read the letters. So I spent the pandemic reading Emily Dickinson's 1,789 letters and what I thought at the time was 1,049 letters. Now it's 1,304 letters as of the publication that came out earlier this year. So I awakened to pretty much the letters that Emily wrote in first person, primary source documents. And I was just, how could this be overlooked, for so many years? Emily described her love of Susan similar to what Dante felt toward Beatrice, or Petrarch toward Laura, or Tennyson's love toward Maud, or Swift's
May I
love
have your
toward
attention, please? The
Stella.
library is now closed. The library is now closed. We would appreciate your leaving the building promptly. Thank you.
Which we know as kind of an insatiable desire. And so, certainly, those letters indicated that, and I have a quote here from a letter that Emily wrote to Susan when she was teaching math in Baltimore. I hope for you so much and feel so eager for you, feel that I cannot wait, feel that now I must have you, that the expectation once more to see your face again makes me feel so hot and feverish and my heart beats so fast. So it's one letter after another with these kind of expressions. And I then started looking at the poems and then reading the scholarship of Judith Farr and Benjamin Miner and several others who speak to the queer dimension of Dickinson that is now finally coming to light. I'm not the first to write in the persona of an imagined Emily. Lucy Brock-Roydo did so in her master letters before me. So I had a progenitor, I guess, that paved the way, with whom I have much appreciation and respect.
Rosa,
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Billy Connor, Billy Connor's poems. He has written a poem about Emily Dickinson.
Yes.
And it might be worth your while to, compare what you were describing between Susan and Emily with what Billy says about Emily.
Yes, can you help us? Can you describe? Oh, thank you. I'll take a look.
Just for your personal benefit.
I will.
It would be something to look up.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Liz?
You're all very different poets, but it's very clear that you pay deep attention to language. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your writing process and how you start your poems, and more in particular, I'm assuming that you all do a lot of repetition because your poems are so strong and memorable. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
I'll start. Yeah, we'll go down the line. My process, like a writing journal is the most important thing for me. And now that exists as a note on my cell phone, that when like I experience interesting language, or I hear this factoid, because like science and like I do a lot of research for my work too. So when I catch like language, or hey, you need to look this up, that sounds really interesting, you might want to write about that at some point. And then just start gathering all that stuff. And then when I sit down to write, I almost feel like more like a like collagist. I'm pulling stuff that kind of catches my interest that morning, or usually in the morning, and then I pull that over to a new file, and then I start just like working with that language and seeing what comes up. Usually there's a fair bit of research to kind of understand like that the landfill poem. Like I learned a ton about that, and only so much of it makes it into the poem, right? Just the tip of the iceberg. But usually the research also, like, I find so much interesting language too when I'm like learning about this stuff. So it starts to like kind of gather some steam that way, and then I like write as a prose blob, like a paragraph. That's where I start before I like touch form or lineation or anything, and try to get that language like as far along as I want it to be, and then start thinking about form and lineation and stuff like that. I think that sounds right.
Well, I know that, I'm not even sure how to answer that question exactly, but I do know that sometimes I think about when I'm trying to, come up with a subject to write about, and I don't know what to write about. Sometimes I make a list of moments that have provided kind of a window of clarity into a period of my life. Maybe those are important narrative poems, I'm not sure. But sometimes I try to think of those moments. And definitely for me, seeing a full rainbow over Provincetown Harbor, I had never seen a double rainbow before. And they ended up on the front page of the paper the next day, and that was an astounding experience. But you wonder why is it exactly? But I do know that I write, that I care a lot about writing in lines as units of musical measure, and I'm not sure I can define that exactly. But I do think that the turn of the line is important to me too. So I like writing good lines and what I think are good lines. And even if it doesn't make narrative sense to me as I'm in an early draft, and I guess like Clayton, I like the collage form. I think that's been with us in the 20th century for a long time. A lot of modern poets wrote in collage-like forms. So I like disjunctive moments in poems to break that narrative line or rough it up a little bit. And beyond that, I don't know the answer to the question.
In terms of answering the question, I cannot write in the frame of mind that I would call life as usual. So I have to break through a membrane into this other psychic field first, and I know when I'm there, and I know when I'm not there. But when I'm there, it's all I know is that it's welcoming, and I go fishing. Or maybe that's because I come from a lobster fishing family, I'm not sure. But I go fishing and welcome anything that comes. And from there, as long as I can get, it will take me back there just during the whole revision process. It's already seated in that psychic field, so it pulls me in. I don't have to go find it, but it is almost, it feels like a membrane, literally. And I rely on other poets to get me there. So I feel like I have company as I go, so it's not so terrifying. Call Back was a very different book for me to write because it started out as just simply a research project with Call Back was the last thing in my mind is a poetry book. But as I was doing the research, I kept notes that then became diary-like in the I persona, and then appeared as shorter lines and looked like poems. So I guess Dickinson took me into that psychic space where the research just simply kept morphing into something that looked like poetry. I then sent it to Stephen. He said, yeah, keep going with it as long as you've got your epigraphs, you're safe in terms of conversing with the epigraph. And that conversation just kept going all through the pandemic. I was alone in a farmhouse in Maine, getting a farmhouse through yet another winter with the kitty and Emily. So, and I look for the turn that kind of breaks the trance in the poem. That usually comes later, unless I'm really, really lucky. Thank you.
I will add one thing, and that is for 10 years, I think, Rosa has organized a July writing group I've been part of for 10 years. And in July, we write something new every day, and not necessarily a poem. And it could be really bad, really horrible, but we email it to each other without commentary. Maybe there's 6 or 7 of us. The group changes a little bit every year. But by the end of the month, we're writing much more fluidly because we're writing every day, and sometimes we're really trying to get home, a rough poem by the end of the day. And the whole trick is the next day you put that aside and write something new again, and you end up with a lot of rough material. And I know that both our books are full of these July poems.
Let me know if anyone's interested in joining us during July.
Well, you pretty much answered it, but then can also be addressed with the others. So my question was, how much research, Emerson, Thoreau, Emily Dickinson, and a lot of scientific references there, how much research really goes into it?
Well, yes, I can just answer briefly that being raised in New England, on the coast of Maine, when I visited during the pandemic, Amherst, and looked through the windows and saw Emily's kitchen and also the kitchen in the Evergreens, I went, oh my word, their kitchens look just like the one I grew up in. The copper boiler, the buckets on the dry sink, the water dipper with the buckets, and so it was that. So I had a kind of a personal experience, but also doing a lot of research. When was the first railroad? When did that go through Amherst? What did Emily hear, in her mornings or noon or in the evenings? What kind of light was there? Were there gas lamps at that point in time? When did gas lamps be invented? So I just, did a deep dive into what Amherst was like from multiple perspectives. Thank you.
I think, some of the research was kind of like that, like primary research. Like, if I go somewhere cool in, around my, I don't know, there's this place in Missouri called Elephant Rock State Park, and it's called Elephant Rock because these rocks look like elephants. It's not super creative, but I went there and I was like, this is amazing. I'm gonna write a poem about this. A lot of times though, I don't know, I'm starting with some sort of experience that's probably like the center, like the main room of the house or the home, but then like doing the research helps me expand quite a bit, because I like start learning new stuff. And I get to bring in, like I said, not only like information, but like language that I wouldn't, yeah, it becomes like, well, yeah, furniture, and then I think like new rooms too, it's like an addition over here that I wouldn't have had if I didn't go find out from the Missouri Department of Conservation, like conservation, like why there are armadillos in Missouri now, that weren't before. So it helps me like get out of myself in a way that I find very, very helpful.
I don't really consider myself a scholar, but I am an American Lit professor, or I was one, I just retired. So I'm a reader, and you know, I think in terms more, rather than research, of fact checking. You know, I want to make sure if I'm saying something like I had the wrong number of heartbeats for hummingbirds, and it might not be exactly 1,000 per minute, something like that. But I did check that, so that, you know, I want to have the details right afterwards. But if I'm writing, you know, about Thoreau, I've had to teach that material, so you know, I can know a little bit about all that. Yeah, I don't know. I love to read history books. I read a biography of John Brown. He's a remarkable individual, way beyond the popular notion of who he was. I would love to write a series of poems. I'm not sure I would do it, but I like to read. I have American studies background, so I read history and literature.
Any other questions? I have one more.
So why are there armadillos now?
Climate change. Just the climate moving, the warmth moving north. Yeah.
So they migrated, they didn't.
Yeah. I was like, why are they? And usually I see them like dead on the side of the road as roadkill. That's the most common experience. And I was like, don't think they were. I don't remember these being here before. Yeah.
Rosa Lane, Stephen Haven, and Clayton Adam Clark, thank you so much for this reading and conversation. They have books for sale in the back, so please come visit and talk to them, and thank you all for coming.